14 Bannerman Road is where Sarah Jane Smith lived.
And for the final time, 14 Bannerman Road is the name of my podcast about it. This time, Farewell Sarah Jane, written by Russell T Davies, produced by Emily Cook, and first made public on the official Doctor Who YouTube channel on the 19th of April 2020, the 9th anniversary of the passing of Elizabeth Sladen. Might be a little bit of a sad one, so if you're full of festive cheer, then feel free to come back later. But I hope that you join me in essentially honouring the Sarah Jane Adventures and Elizabeth Sladen as this webcast sets out to do. The video begins, and we see Jacob Dudman in an audio booth. He'll be our narrator. You may recognise him from his work voice acting for various Doctors for Big Finish audio dramas. The format of this whole video is kind of a visual audio book, primarily narrated. Clips from sundry actors are then inserted as they act out their dialogue. He says that it had been a lovely service, the service, of course, being the funeral service of Sarah Jane Smith. Her character had not received an end on TV, as we know, and the remaining episodes we talked about were, of course, written with the show continuing in mind. So this is Russell T Davies officially saying what happened to Sarah Jane, but we'll see exactly how ambiguous he wishes to leave that as the story progresses. Our core gang of Luke, Clyde and Rani are described as being there, along with many, many smiling, sad guests. These include unit soldiers and the Brigadier's daughter, who is of course Kate Stewart, who gives Luke a hug. Clyde talks to a nice couple from Australia, Tegan and Nissa, both companions of the Doctor. They overlapped in the Fifth Doctor's era, and Russell's taken the moment to get them together and make the Whoniverse a little bit more gay, which makes me happy. Ben and Polly get a mention, first and second Doctor companions, as do Barbara and Ian, first Doctor companions. I'm unsure if any of them ever actually crossed paths with Sarah Jane. You'd have to ask someone with more knowledge of Old Who than I. But in Death of the Doctor, Sarah Jane did mention having researched the companions, so it's possible that in the intervening years that we didn't see, they did reach out and form a connection. And then Martha and Mickey, whose companionship of the Doctor kind of overlapped in his 10th incarnation, of course helmed by Russell T Davies. They're revealed to have had a son called August. The Doctor Who Series 4 finale two-parter, The Stolen Earth / Journey's End, had a big crossover with both the Sarah Jane Adventures and Torchwood, so Russell's characters from across the universe all being there together is quite nice. First Doctor companion Dodo is mentioned as being there, Grace Holloway from the movie with the 8th Doctor, Liz Shaw, the 3rd Doctor companion, who's managed to make it off the moon base this time, 2nd Doctor's companion Victoria Waterfield. If you're going to make it a reunion, make it a reunion. Doctor Who has a long old history to pull from. We're told that Skye managed to manifest in her human form, implying that some version of the Battle of Bannerman Road did happen, and we imagine she used her powers to stop the trickster. Well, we'll see. Speaking of Torchwood a moment ago, Captain Jack is also there at a distance. Maria and Alan were unable to make it in person, but connected via video link. They'd missed their plane from America because they were chasing a band drill. Monster from the 6th Doctor's era, I think. I'm allowing Russell to indulge in this level of fan service. This is a celebration of Sarah Jane, who is so central to Doctor Who, it basically becomes a celebration of Doctor Who itself. The story pretty much goes on to say this. All the guests celebrate Sarah Jane's life, but they also swap tales amongst each other. These are all people who in some way share that link to the Doctor and to Sarah Jane and to each other. It's mentioned, almost as an aside, that the waiters turned out to be jackals of the backwards clock, servants of the trickster, but that trying to attack all these people gathered in one place is a silly idea, and within 10 minutes the trickster was shrunk to the size of a doll and trapped in a chest at the bottom of the Atlantic for the next 1,000 years. And I like that. Because, well, you can speculate about whether that means some kind of modified version of Battle of Bannerman Road happened, exactly how much of it went as originally written in 2010-ish. It's not really about that. Of course, these people will never catch a break. Of course, if they team up, they're going to have to fight something off. Of course, the trickster is never truly gone. He's basically a god. But then it's time to put all that to the side and focus on Sarah Jane. They all swap numbers. They say they'll meet up yearly, call themselves a family Smith. And then as people begin to peel off, Jo Jones comes over to our group and we get the first video as Katie Manning comes in to reprise her role. She apologises for breaking a vase, of course, and then talks about how much she loves Sarah Jane, and this is where the walls between the story and reality start to thin. Jo loves Sarah Jane, and we can see that Katie loved Elizabeth too. That's why she's here, that's the point of this webcast, so the actors can come together and talk about how much they loved Elizabeth. They just happen to be doing it in character. She also drops the heart-wrenching line that the Doctor couldn't show up, not with two hearts. Imagine them both breaking. She name drops another granddaughter of hers, Rio de Janeiro. It's just dawned on me that she's not the one naming them. I'd assume it'd be her kids, who are the parents of these children. And it's a lot of grandchildren, so I'm assuming multiple kids. They've made this sort of sibling-like pact to convince their significant others to keep up this naming convention. It's great. I love it. Geeta and Haresh are there, of course. They missed the deal with the trickster because Geeta had brought sausage rolls, but the waiters, I assume the real waiters, had mixed up the plate and taken it to the kitchen, so she went to get it back, and then by the time they were back, it was over. Absolutely brilliant. So in character. And it's Mina Anwar's time to do her video as Geeta. And she says that she used to think that the kids should have been going out and going to parties or going into town, doing teenage things, but they were always around Sarah Jane, and that said something about how remarkable she was. And maybe it's just me projecting something onto that, but I feel a hint that this is about the viewers. It's sort of saying you sat down and you watched the Sarah Jane Adventures on TV each week it was on because Elizabeth was remarkable, and it was a remarkable show, and thank you for watching it. And then a certain Dorothy McShane comes over to them, better known as Ace. It's time for Sophie Aldridge's video. She says that when she was trapped with the Doctor on a prison planet once, he went quiet and then told her that he missed Sarah Jane. And then years later, she met Sarah Jane and they had an adventure together, and she misses her too and will do for the rest of her life. When she leaves, she takes K9 with her. Perhaps it was in that adventure that Luke handed her custody, but it could have been any time in between. Eventually, everyone leaves till it's just Luke, Clyde, and Rani, and it's time for Danny's video. And ever the Joker, Clyde says that, nah, she was alright. But then seriously, he says that he could have been nothing, but Sarah Jane saw the potential in him, and he wishes he told her how much he loved her. Because he did, and because she was the best, and because they were so lucky to have found her. Luke drives them back to Bannerman Road, and they talk about the day that they heard that she died. Luke was with UNIT in Geneva, Clyde was a guest at Comic-Con in New York, and Rani was reporting on Project Refreeze at the North Pole, which continues Russell T Davies' theme of the tech on Earth being just a little bit more advanced than in real life. Though we aren't sure exactly when this is set. They say that it seems like Sarah Jane waited till they were all out of the country so that she could save them some pain. Or Luke and Clyde discuss this at least, but Rani doesn't join in much with the discussion, having been pretty quiet throughout actually. They enter the attic, and they activate Mr. Smith, who, while calm and formal, can't hide the sadness in his voice. They've been left instructions by Sarah Jane to switch him off till someone, whoever the next one is, finds him again in the future. And after that, they're to continue on with their lives. Luke lending his intellect to UNIT, Clyde meeting about adapting his Silver Bullet comic into a film. You'll love to hear that. Hopefully it's progressed a little from its Batman origins in the however many years it's been. And Rani's going to report on something that would bring down the government. Well, isn't that interesting? There's no indication here that Clyde and Rani are together, which is also interesting. And it seems like Luke is the only one who kind of continued in the alien world going and working with UNIT, if you don't count Maria. But if you do count the game The Lonely Assassins, then Rani did keep up with it a bit too. They say that they see each other again at Christmas though, like always. And then it's Tommy Knight's video time. Luke talks about having the best mum in the universe. He talks about how she told him that Sanjay was interested in him when he was oblivious, and now they've been married for 5 years. I love that payoff to that original intention all those years back. Finally, we get that confirmation, and it's lovely. He says that sure, he was created by the Bane, but it was Sarah Jane who gave him life. And then the boys head off, and Rani is left alone in the attic with Mr. Smith. And it's Angeli's video time. All the videos were recorded by each actor, I assume, at their respective homes. The webcast was made as part of Doctor Who Lockdown, a sort of watch-along that evolved into something more last year. And so, while the actors couldn't get together, Angie's video is a little bit different. She's overlaid onto a background of the attic, which is very nice, And at the end of it all, thanks is given to Sacha Dhawan, the last actor to play the Master. He is romantically involved with Anjali Mahindra, so for a little bit of extra Doctor Who-ness to add to all this, it could well have been him that set this video up. Ronnie says to Mr. Smith that she doesn't think that Sarah Jane is dead. She thinks that the Doctor came back for Sarah Jane and took her on one last trip, and that's where they are now, travelling out there in the TARDIS forever. And she cries a tear, and Mr. Smith agrees with her and shuts down. And Ronnie goes downstairs and locks the door and walks away. And we end. And that is the Sarah Jane Adventures. But of course, it's not though, is it? Really, there's games like The Lonely Assassins where characters feature. There's the Sarah Jane Alien Files that covered a selection of aliens and in 6 episodes. There's 10 whole audio stories called the Sarah Jane Adventures Collection. The first 8 narrated by Elizabeth, the penultimate by Danny, and the last by Anjali. As I said at the end of The Man Who Never Was, the story goes on forever. So long as there's still a fandom, so long as people write fan fiction or make Twitter accounts or listen to podcasts, the story goes on. That's what I love about it. So I suppose I better summarize everything now. Never any good at summaries. I'm not sure if you noticed that listening to these past episodes. And the hypocrisy I know as I would go on and on at Phil for his endings. But when I started this podcast, I set out to see if the Sarah Jane Adventures was good and if it's still held up now. And yes, of course it is. Of course it does. It was made with such heart that even when it was bad, it was good. Yes, it's a little bit rough around the edges, but that contributes so much charm. I just hope that the children who watch CBBC now have a show that is similar, because it provided so much to my childhood, and it still affects me to this day. It is a spin-off done right. It's so obviously part of the Doctor Who universe in the way that the characters feel and love and come up against multiple reused rubber alien suits. But it's also a brilliant standalone. It's a wonderful look back to a wonderful era. An interesting one now that we know that Russell plans to return, albeit somewhere within the next 2 to 3 years. I love the Sarah Jane Adventures. I'm sure I've made that clear across, 29 episodes? And I just want to thank you for listening along to me do just that now for the final time. Farewell, the Sarah Jane Adventures. Farewell, Elizabeth Sladen. And farewell, Sarah Jane.